showing up. This is actually the largest showing we've had with the shortest amount of notice, and so you know, hopefully I won't let you guys down too much. I don't know if you knew who I was or if anyone told anybody, but I'm finding out that some guy knew some other guy, and then everyone Facebook or texted, and now people are showing up for pizza. But in general, why I'm here is I put together a book that you guys are handing around, getting the pizza sauce all over, called Worthless, and an organization called CFAC decided to put me on a book tour. Now they're also associated with Young Conservatives, College Republicans, things like that, and so out went the broadcast or the bulletin to put it together. And they originally wanted me to do a book tour, which this is. However, I didn't want to just come in here and say, here's my book, buy it, and tell you everything that's in the book, because what would that be? It wouldn't be enough. So what I did is I put together a presentation that is much more comprehensive, of which I addressed the book, but it only addresses a minor aspect of something that I believe is much larger and more important to you guys, and that is the general economic and social and cultural environment that you're going to be running into when you guys do graduate from college. And so instead of just, hey, buy this book, blah, 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 I wanted to give you something that we didn't have when I was graduating back in the 90s. And that was somebody who's been down the road before, someone's got 10, 15 years more experience than you guys do, that we had, to make our lives a lot easier so we don't make the same mistakes that, other people did before. So we're trying to give you a little bit of a heads up, inform you about things you're going to run into, so that hopefully you get a better life, an easier life than we had going down the road. So the presentation we put together is how Gen Y is completely, hopelessly, and totally screwed. Right? Now, I put this title not to be sophomoric or shocking, but I did want it to be a little bit of an attention getter, because you guys are really hosed. You have no idea. And unless you are any students of economics or finance, anyone? Okay, so you guys know. The rest of you have no idea. And I know you've probably heard in the news, like, Social Security, something or other, or whatever else, well, American Idol's on. We're going to show you guys exactly what kind of problems you're facing here soon, and what you can do to overcome them, or at least make a better life, right? So basically we have three parts. Part one, you're economically screwed. Part two, you're socially and culturally screwed. And by the end of part two, you're going to be feeling pretty sad and depressed and suicidal, but do not worry. Part three, how can we get ourselves unscrewed, will be the final part there. So part one, you're screwed in terms of economics. Put together a little thing called Gen Y economics, and namely focusing on debt and deficits. And here you're probably most familiar with this in terms of the federal government running deficits. You've heard of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. You're never going to collect Social Security. The baby boomers are going to dry it all out. So that's what we're talking about here. But not so much in terms of an awareness, but in terms of scale and size. Now we have the first chart here, and this is the federal government debt going back to 1901 or something like that. Right? Now, there's a problem with this chart. It is somewhat misrepresenting the deficits. And what's wrong with this chart? What has it not been adjusted for?
Inflation.
Inflation, right. I mean, if you look back, you see this little blip here. Does anyone know what that is? World War I. And this little blip here, that's World War II. So what's missing is obviously inflation, and not just inflation, but also the fact that our population has grown since that time. It's not like we're going to go, oh my God, in the past 10 years it's gone to hell. That's not what's happened. So what we have to do among this chart and many others is adjust it for population and inflation. So we convert everything into percentage of what's called GDP, or gross domestic product. That's the size of our economy. So a lot of these charts will have that adjustment in there, so it makes sense a little bit more. Now, when we adjust for GDP, this makes a lot more sense. Here's World War I, here's World War II, what we would expect. And then we have, varying surpluses and deficits. And then up to here, most recently, we have the largest deficits in a non-wartime period. I know we have Iraq and Afghanistan, but not an all-encompassing global war like World War I or World War II. Even Vietnam, we didn't have this much of a deficit. Right? This is even a slightly outdated chart, because if you go the next 2 years, it actually goes to 10%. So 10% of our GDP is a deficit. The deficit is equal to 10% of our GDP every year. Okay? And that's bad because we're not even at war. And this is peacetime, right? Now, if we go back even further, here we show deficits in terms of positive numbers. This is the same chart that just goes back even further. Here's a little more representative going on to 2012. But you have World War II, World War I. Anyone know what that is? Civil War. We're running deficits akin to a civil war when we're killing each other in our own country, right? So it really shows you this is not some blip and it's a cute little blue chart you got there. This is like serious stuff that we are running in terms of our government finances, simply because we're not in a war, global or civil. Now, your deficits, I don't know if they've ever, economics 101 if they told you the difference, but every year you spend more money than you take in, that's that particular year's deficit. So like you guys are students, and every year you spend a little bit more than you take in because you have student loans and maybe working part-time. So each year the extra amount of debt you accrue is your deficit for that year. The cumulative, or the accumulation of all those deficits is your debt. So when you guys graduate, you will have a total student debt, and that's your total amount. The federal government is the same way, but here we see the same problem with inflation. It's not like we didn't have debt back in the olden days in the 1960s. We did, there's just the population and inflation. So once again, we have to adjust for GDP. If we put our debt as a percentage of GDP, once again, we see the severity of our finances. Here's World War II at the peak, World War I, Civil War, and now this is projected out to 2016, but it's still there. Right? We have the highest amount of debt ever, bar World War II in the history of the United States. Although some economists would argue that. But you get the idea. We have a lot of debt. Now, who pays back the debt? Who pays it? Whose debt is it? Is it the Chinese debt? The Italian debt? Whose debt? The federal government debt. And who is the federal government?
Representatives of us.
You guys, right. We're the federal government. We're the ones that get to pay the bill because the federal government doesn't just print off money and then pay it back. They tax us so that they can pay it back. So this is the debt you guys get to pay. Now, as it currently stands, that's $52,000 per person. However, I made a slight adjustment and I subtracted out 76 million people. Why did I subtract out 76 million people?
People under 18, maybe.
That's good too. But there's a particular group of people that when this debt is going to have to be paid back aren't going to be around.
Elderly.
The elderly, right, the baby boomer generation. They're going to be gone. Now, they're going to be replaced by more than 76 million people, but they're going to be kids, as you point out, who, you can't, well, kid, you're 3 years old, go off to the coal mine now and make some money so we can tax you. That's not how it's going to work. So the debt is going to squarely land on your generation and my generation. If we adjust that 76 million people, that results in $70,000 per person. So coming fresh out of the gun, you're already facing $70,000 per person in debt, and you haven't even done nothing. I mean, you haven't even graduated or hit the labor market or anything like that. So you already got a disadvantage starting your career. One more minor problem, though. Are we done spending money? No, this is what we've spent in the past. If you look at the future, we have made a lot of commitments to various entitlement programs. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and various demographers and actuaries and statisticians come up with different projections in terms of how much is going to have to be spent in the future, but it varies. Now, if you listen to anyone who Dr. Walter E. Williams is, he's great. You should listen to him. He's funny as heck. But he quotes the Congressional Budget Office figures of $106 trillion in terms of unfunded future commitment in terms of spending. Now, unfunded means it's not in the projections of our current budget, which means the taxes will have to be raised. If it is $106 trillion going on into infinitum, they estimate the 10% tax bracket will be jacked up to 25. The middle income tax bracket of 25 will go up to 66, and the 35% tax bracket will go up to 92%. Now, I don't know about you, but if my tax rate goes up to 66%, you know what I'm doing? I'm going home and playing video games and getting drunk. I am not working, that is for sure. It ain't going to be worth it. And the heck, if I'm in the 92 percentile, I'm going to Belize or Mexico, right? So if that ever happens, it's hokey pokey numbers, because since people won't work anymore because the tax rates now deter you from working because it's not worth it, you'll never generate that amount of revenue. Now, the 160 trillion figure is the highest figure I've ever seen, and this is where we kind of get into the gray world of economics. Nothing is precise or finite, but I've seen ranges from 35 trillion to this 106. I'm going to assume around 50 trillion conservatively to make my point. We take that 50 trillion divided by the 224 million of the people who will be around to work that up. That results in $223,000 of new debt. You add it to the current amount. Now you have $70,000 in debt today, with an additional future implied debts of $225,000, roughly $300,000, which is a nice house in Addison, I find, or a condo, actually. Addison is really nice, I find. But in any case, that sucks. All right? And you haven't done anything. You didn't, like, kick puppies or shave kittens to deserve this. I mean, this is just the finances that happened from before. Okay? So that's one reason why you're at a huge economic disadvantage. Second reason, the government is crowding out the individual. What I mean by that is the government is growing larger and larger. Now here once again we see some as a percentage of GDP. And what I did is I took federal government spending and divided it by GDP. So what percent of our economy does the government spend every year? Well, it used to be 3%. So imagine a nice little 3% income tax bracket. That would be it. That would be very nice. Right? But World War I, World War II, obviously, the general trend has been to go up. And most recently under Barack Obama, the spending, this is why we have the multi-trillion-dollar deficit, well not multi, but trillion plus, the spending's gone up to 30%. This chart does not include one huge cost though. What's missing? We got the federal government, what else?
Medicare.
State and local. Well, that'd be in federal, that'd be there, yeah. We're missing state and local. Now, depending on what state you're in, that can be anywhere from 10 to another 15%. So if you're in California or New York, you're easily at a 50% tax rate. Or spending. There's some minor differences, but I won't go into it there. The larger point is that the government is becoming more and more present and invasive and accounting for a higher percentage of the economy. Naturally, there's some consequences. One, if you're giving away free money, more and more people will take government assistance. Here you see the welfare reform in 1994, but the recession is starting to kick up here again. The Heritage Institute put together this is just government assistance. It doesn't include any kind of form of government check, pension, Social Security, disability, stuff like that. So they came up with this index. Whichever one you want to follow, the general trend has been to go up. Also, because of our progressive taxation system, today almost half the people don't pay any income taxes because you get a earned income tax credit. You get to write off your kids. So if you have 4 kids and you make $40,000, your effective tax rate in income, not sales or property tax, goes to 0. So a lot less people have skin in the game, and these people are perfectly happy. They're like, heck yeah, I don't want to go ahead. Thank you for the free roads. Minor problem though with all this, the government does not produce anything. This is not an opinion. This is a fact. And the reason the government doesn't produce anything is because the government doesn't own factories or cows or whatever else have you that you would have in a communist government. Now you could argue the government does own part of General Motors, so in that case, but taking that aside, government does what? What does the government do? If we take out the mint, what does it do? And so out went the broadcast or the bulletin to put it together. And they originally wanted me to do a book tour, which this is. However, I didn't want to just come in here and say, you know, here's my book, buy it, and tell you everything that's in the book, because with that, it wouldn't be enough. So what I did is I put together a presentation that is much more comprehensive, of which, you know, I addressed the book, but it only addresses a minor aspect of something that I believe is much larger and more important to you guys, and that is the general economic and social and cultural environment that you're going to be running into when you guys do graduate from college. And so instead of just, you know, hey, buy this book, blah, 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 I wanted to give you something that we didn't have when I was graduating back in the 90s. And that was somebody who's been down the road before, someone's got 10, 15 years more experience than you guys do, than we had, to make our lives a lot easier so we don't make the same mistakes that, other people did before. So we're trying to give you a little bit of a heads up, inform you about things you're going to run into, so that hopefully you get a better life, an easier life than we had going down the road. So the presentation we put together is how Gen Y is completely, hopelessly, and totally screwed. Right? Now, I put this title not to be sophomoric or shocking, but I did want it to be a little bit of an attention getter, because you guys are really hosed. You have no idea. And unless you are any students of economics or finance, anyone? Okay, so you guys know. The rest of you have no idea. And I know you've probably heard in the news, like, oh, Social Security, something or other, whatever else, well, American Idol, all out. So that's what we're talking about here. But not so much in terms of an awareness, but in terms of scale and size. Now we have the first chart here, and this is the federal government debt going back to 1901 or something like that. Right? Now, there's a problem with this chart. It is somewhat misrepresenting the deficits. And what's wrong with this chart? What has it not been adjusted for?
Inflation?
Inflation, right. I mean, if you look back, you see this little blip here. Does anyone know what that is? World War I. And this little blip here, that's World War II. So what's missing is obviously inflation, and not just inflation, but also the fact that our population has grown since that time. It's not like we're going to go, oh my God, in the past 10 years it's gone to hell. That's not what's happened. So what we have to do among this chart and many others is adjust it for population. Well, thanks for showing up. This is actually the largest showing we've had with the shortest amount of notice, and so hopefully I won't let you guys down too much. I don't know if you knew who I was or if anyone told anybody, but I'm finding out that some guy knew some other guy, and then everyone Facebook or texted, and now people are showing up for pizza. But in general, why I'm here is I put together a book that you guys are handing around, getting the pizza sauce all over, called Worthless, and an organization called CFAC decided to put me on a book tour. Now they're also associated with young conservatives, college Republicans, things like that. We're going to show you guys exactly what kind of problems you're facing here soon, and what you can do to overcome them, or at least make a better life. Right? So basically we have 3 parts. Part 1, you're economically screwed. Part 2, you're socially and culturally screwed. And by the end of part 2, you're going to be feeling pretty sad and depressed and suicidal, but do not worry. Part 3, how can we get ourselves unscrewed, will be the final part there. So part 1, you're screwed in terms of economics. Put together a little thing called Gen Y economics, and namely focusing on debt and deficits. And here you're probably most familiar with this in terms of the federal government running deficits. You've heard of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. You're never going to collect Social Security. The baby boomers are going to drive